Okay, students, now we move to the same second point, that is change in the prices of related goods. First, I like to clear the concept of or definition of the related goods. It is also discussed in the previous classes. So, what is related goods? Goods are related if a change in price of one commodity leads to change in demand for another commodities, then both the commodities are called as related goods. So, X and Y are two commodities. If the change in price of X commodity leads to change in demand for other goods, that is Y good, then these two commodities are called as related goods. So there are two types of related goods we have got, that is first one is what? Substitute goods. Substitute goods. Second is what? Complementary goods. These are two goods which can be called as related goods. First one is the substitute goods and second one is the complementary goods. Substitute goods are not demanded in the same time, that is there is no combined demand of X and Y commodity in the same time. But in case of the complementary goods, that means there exists the combined demand. Substitute goods, say for example tea and coffee are substitute goods, because when tea is demanded, coffee is not demanded. So same situation, that is there is no combined demand. But in case of the complementary goods, all the related goods or concerned goods are demanded at the same time. Say for example bricks, cement, that is sand. These are the examples of what? Complementary goods. Now we see the impact of change in income in case of the both goods separately, that is substitute goods and complementary goods separately. Now we first consider the situation of the substitute goods. What is the impact of change in income in case of the substitute goods? First you consider two commodities, tea and coffee, as a substitute goods. Here you see the diagrammatical representation of this situation. This is OY vertical axis and we are measuring price of tea here, and this is horizontal axis, here we are measuring demand for tea. That is only demand for tea and price of tea are considered in this diagram. Now you see this is DD demand curve, and this DD demand curve shows what? When the price of coffee is rupees 250, that is when the price of coffee per kg is rupees 250, then the demand for tea is shown by this demand curve. We can also name it as DT, that is demand for tea when the price of per kg coffee is rupees 250. So this is original demand curve of tea, mind it. Next, this is DT1 demand curve, that is this is rightward shift of the demand curve of tea when price of per kg coffee is rupees 300. You see the situation when the price of coffee was 250, then demand for tea was indicated by this demand curve, that is DT demand curve. But when the price of coffee increases from 250 to 300, then we get DT1 demand curve, that is increasing amount of tea is demanded when price of coffee increases. Why this happen? Because as the price of coffee increases, then the consumer decide to substitute tea in against of coffee. That is, he or she decides to substitute some tea for coffee. In other words, they may buy more of tea even when its price is the same. In simple sense, as the coffee become costlier, so the consumer will demand try to more unit of what, tea. Therefore the demand curve will shift rightward, and this is what another new demand curve, that is dt2 and dt2. This is leftward shift demand curve. When the price of coffee is rupees 200, that means as the price of coffee falls, then consumer will buy more unit of the coffee. Therefore, the demand for tea will decrease. As a result, the demand curve will shift leftward. So, here in this situation, as the price of coffee increases, so consumer will buy more unit of tea. That means consumer demand in case of the tea will increase. Get my point? Now, as the price of coffee falls, as a result, consumer will buy more unit of coffee, so less unit of tea. So this is the situation in case of the substitute goods. Next we see the situation in case of what, inferior complementary goods. Now see the fact in case of the complementary goods. Now what is complementary goods? Complementary goods are consumed together. For example, tea, sugar, shoes, socks, pen, inks are sub examples of complementary goods. In our discussion, we consider tea and sugar are two complementary goods. You see the first figure. This is y-axis. Again, we are measuring price of sugar in the y-axis, and x-axis we are measuring demand for sugar. So here we are considering two complementary goods, tea and sugar, and this is DD, original demand curve, which shows the demand for sugar, that is amount demanded of sugar is OM when the price of sugar is OP. That means at OP price, amount demand for sugar is OM, and this is indicated by DD, original demand curve. Now there is a shift in the demand curve from its original position, that is DD to D2D2. This is newly shift demand curve, that is leftward shift demand curve, which indicates decrease or fall in the demand for sugar. That is, original amount of demand for sugar was OM, now it is OM2, but interestingly the price is constant at OP. In the law of demand, what we have got, that when the demand price of the commodity increases, there is a fall in the demand curve. But here, without changing in the price of the commodity, that means increasing the price of commodity, there is a fall in demand for sugar here. Why this happen? Because here we consider sugar and tea are two complementary goods. Here the price of tea for increases in the market. Price of tea increases in the market, and hence demand for tea will decrease. The result is what? Demand for tea will decrease when price of tea, PT, what implies here? Price of tea, PT, T for tea, and again DT, T for tea, demand for tea. Demand for tea will fall when price of tea will increase. This is the statement of the law of demand. As the demand for tea will decrease as a result of increase in the price of tea, indirectly it will decrease in the demand for sugar. Got my point? Because both the commodities are complementary goods and there is a combined demand in case of the complementary goods, as a result of increase in the price of commodity, it will decrease the demand for tea, and also it will impact on demand for sugar. That means now people will demand less unit of sugar, because here the market demand for tea has decreased due to increase in its price of the commodity. So relation is very simple, because tea and sugar both are combinedly demanded. So as the demand for tea decreases in the market, as a result it will also decrease the demand for sugar, because here price of tea has increased, not the price of sugar has increased. Therefore, what is complementary goods? When there is a change in price of one good may change in the demand for other goods, then it is called the related goods. And now in case of the complementary goods, what happens we have seen already. Now you see the next situation, next diagram. This is OY axis, price of sugar is measured, and again this is OX axis, we measure demand for sugar. As like as in the previous diagram, DD implies it is the original demand curve, and it implies what? Demand for sugar, and the price is same as in the first diagram, it is OP, and demand for the commodity is OM. Now the demand curve shifts upward to D1, which shows increasing demand for the sugar from OM to OM1. That is, this is increasing increase in demand for sugar. So TL and MM1 are equal. So increase in demand for sugar is MM1 and TL. Interestingly, here also the price of sugar is changed, but according to the statement of law of demand, the demand for a certain or particular commodity will increase when the price of that commodity must be fall. So this is the law of demand. But here we see what? Without changing in the price of commodity or at constant price of the commodity, then there is a increase in the demand for the commodity. Why this happen? Again you consider the same situation. This is price of tea. When price of tea falls in the market, it will increase the demand for tea. Get my point? It is the statement of the law of demand. As price of tea falls in the market, it will increase what? Demand for tea. As the demand for tea in the market increases, it will again increase the demand for sugar, because here tea and sugar are complementary commodities. So as the demand for tea increases in the market, as a result the consumer will demand more unit of sugar at the constant price of sugar. Here price of the sugar is same, but price of tea decreases, and it will leads to increase in the demand for tea, and indirectly or again it will leads to increase in the demand for what? Sugar, because these two commodities are related, because that is, these are complementary goods. In this way we can explain the impact of change in income of the consumer on complementary goods.